Welcome to today's Ray Talk, and I think the theme that I put for today is the benefits of a spiritual practice. Wow, just in this day and age, having a spiritual practice seems to take a lot of attention, and there's so many distractions and so many things to do, and we seem to be on the internet constantly. So first of all, what is the spiritual practice and why would we have it? I think a spiritual practice is something where we disengage from our routine. And there's our daily life, in which we have to do certain chores and things and work and all of that. And that's what my teacher would call the survival level. We all have to do some kind of thing, productive thing in this world. So a spiritual practice is different than that, or a different perspective on that. Babaji said work is worship. Work is worship and idleness is death. So it's not that work can't be a spiritual practice, but you have to be in the right frame of mind for the work to be a spiritual practice. So what would that be? Recall many times when we would go to India and we would be in Harakan, and it would be way up in the mountains, and kind of a lot of peasant people around. And it had electricity, but very rudimentary. I mean, nothing like, well, you've got a washer and dryer next door, So they had this man who they called the Dhobi, and he was the clothes washer. And so you would, when you had clothes that you needed cleaned, you'd give the Dhobi your clothes. And then you'd see him down at the river, washing your clothes, smacking them on a rock, putting them in the water. And all the time he would be saying, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. So that was a form of worship for him. He wasn't using the work to distract himself from his spiritual practice. So I think that was kind of an example that I witnessed, very simple one, but we can also use that in our own life. Like when we're dedicating part of our time, our attention to anything, like what is our attention put on? Is it disconnected from our source? Well, certainly it's not disconnected. You can't really be disconnected, but is our attention disconnected from our source? I think attention is the key word here. Like, what do we give our attention to? And the more in a spiritual life you're giving your attention to that connection, that divine connection, that source energy connection, the more you stay with that awareness of it, and then whatever you're doing becomes a spiritual practice. So, well, you would say, okay, I see your point on that, but why would you need this connection, and what is the benefit of it? Well, the benefit of it is it gives you more clarity, it gives you more presence with what you're doing, the attention increases, the thing that you're doing is done better because you're more present with it. There are many benefits to this connection, constant connection to your source. And I just think about that guy washing the clothes, and the whole day he's like, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. And I don't know why that, I haven't thought of that guy in a long time, but all of a sudden I am. And so that's something that we have to think about. Like, when we're doing anything, what is our attention focused on? Is it focused on the divine aspect or not? And if you are focused on the divine aspect, then there's more opportunity for joy. There's more opportunity for success in what you're doing. There's more opportunity for perfection. You do things well. You don't leave loose ends, that sort of thing. So that's one benefit. You get joy, you get perfection, and you get a job well done. And that's at the level normally we operate in the survival level, but this makes that work as worship. So I think that that's something that we have to all look at who claim we want a spiritual life. I had this little book, and the ashram happened to have it, and it was about this sage Gorakhnath. Babaji had two main devotees, Muniraj, who was kind of the administrative head of the ashram and things, and he ran that very well and very efficiently, and he was also very devoted. And then there was this other sage, Shastraji, and he was a Vedic scholar. So he knew a lot of the scripture. He would be, I guess in our culture, you would call him a priest, but in that culture, they don't, they're more like independent scholars. There's no quite church that so-called ordains them. I mean, their peers give them respect and recognize their knowledge, but there's no Catholic Church organization, that ordains them certain this or that. I mean, it would be other fellow, colleagues that give them kind of an accolade. So anyhow, this Shastraji, he was very wise, very deep. He knew all the scriptures. He wrote scriptures. He wrote this 1,008 names to the Divine Mother. And Babaji said he was a poet in all lifetimes. He and Babaji were often in conversation. And Babaji would say things, and Shastraji would kind of interpret it, because it would be in kind of spiritual shorthand, right? And then Shastraji would kind of give that, whatever Babaji said, kind of elaborate on it and make it clear to people. So there was this one incident apparently, and he was in Kathmandu in Nepal, and he and Babaji had this short conversation, and Babaji was channeling this being Gorakhnath and talking about spiritual practice. And we got, the ashram sent us this little booklet, right? And it's only 20 pages long, not even. And I read the whole thing in one sitting, and what I got out from it was that he was saying the name of God, in this case, Om Namah Shivaya, or Om, or, I would say the lessons in the Course in Miracles. They're like the word, and the word of God, the name of God. That is the supreme yoga, okay? And that's really, that transcends all other yogas, and that's what you need to be totally liberated. I was surprised, because it wasn't that he was putting down other forms of yoga, but he was saying you could be at a certain level with your spiritual practice, and be attached to it. And the very attachment to it is going to be the very thing that's going to prevent you from going all the way. So the final stage is where you let go of all of that, and it's only the Word of God that you immerse yourself in. When the pandemic first hit, we got directions from Babaji to say 10 rounds of Om Namah Shivaya every day. So we did for 5 or 6 months until we got the vaccine, and then we kind of gradually, it sort of slipped away. But now we're going to go back to that. And I just keep thinking of this, this washer man in India, and his whole day he's working and he's just saying Om Namah Shivaya. He's singing Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. And he's like totally focused on that. And it's like a joy. So I think this, for me, getting this little booklet, getting it clear about Om Namah Shivaya. Well, why does it work so much? Because it's total attention, you know. It's total attention on your divine source. And then that enters into everything else you do in your life. So it's like when you establish that connection really strongly, and it's there, and it's in your, it's like it's coming into you constantly, then that not only protects you from outside, you know, malevolent forces, but it keeps you focused. You know, not in you can't do it though in a penance. Like that was the other thing he was saying in this little booklet. He was saying a lot of yogis do penances, you know, where they like stand on their head, or they you know, put their arm out and don't take it down for a year. I mean, they do all these crazy penances in India. And he was saying, you don't need to do any of that. It's the most simple thing I'm going to give you. It's just focus on the name of God or the Word of God. And you know, in the Bible, it's even consistent. In John, it starts out by saying, in the beginning there was the Word, you know, and the Word was made manifest, and that the Christ was around when that Word was made manifest. So he was like the original human being, you know. So, and he was the Son. The Father created the Son, and it was out of the Word that happened. So it's consistent with mystical teachings all over the world. It's not just in India. And the other interesting thing that he said in this little booklet was there are not one Mount Kailash. You know, Kailash is the mountain in Tibet that they claim is the home of Shiva. He said, but there are 8. And the first one is, and there is a Kailash in Harakan, where in Babaji's ashram, and it's in the foothills of the Himalayas in northern India, right? And that's where we go every year, or we're going every year. And that Mount Kailash, we've even climbed up a couple of times, you know. It's not as high as the one in Tibet or as rugged. But he said that's the first one. That was the first one that came into being. And then it was interesting, he said the last one that came into being was Mecca. And that Muhammad was a great, he didn't use the word Muhammad, he used a different word, but I'm sure he was referring to Muhammad. And he was saying, you know, that is another Kailash, that whole area around Mecca. And so this was very specific, this little booklet. He talked a lot about death, and there are different names in Hindi for death. There's, I think, Yama, there's another one. And he's talking about this dance of karma, which is essentially the dance of death. And he was saying, you know, the only way to escape that, this karma, this dance of karma, which ends in death, is liberation. And the only way to have the liberation is when you're immersed in this vibration of the Word of God, or the presence of God. And that's the most important spiritual practice, is your mind focused on your source energy. And I thought that was really good because, you know, a lot of people do quote unquote meditation, they do yoga, they do different things for their spiritual life. And it's good, I'm not saying it's not good, but it may not free you from your karma, you know? And we want to be freed from the karma, and we want to be freed as fast as we possibly can, you know? I think that little book really helped me. And it's interesting, after I read it, I read it like the day before Christmas, and then on Christmas, oh no, it was the day before Christmas. And I was reading this little booklet, and I was really having some aha moments. And then it was in the evening, and I said to Sandra, well, it's my dad's birthday today. My dad was born on the 24th, and my mother was born on the 18th of December. So they were right around Christmas time. And I said to Sandra, you know, it's Mom and Dad's birthday. Today is actually Dad's birthday. I'm going to take their photo and put it on the Babaji altar and light a candle to them, right? So all day long I had it's actually their wedding photo. And my mom looks so young and so like, oh, she looks so vertical, right? Like she was a very faithful person and didn't have a lot of, not too much baggage, some baggage, but a little, not too much. My dad had more because he was an orphan, brought up in the orphanage during the Depression. But he too was very handsome, not an ounce of fat on them, just beautiful. So I put that picture on there. And then later in the day I thought, you know, I haven't talked to my sister in a while, or I haven't texted her. I'm going to take a picture of that picture on the altar with the candle and send it to her. Well, so I took the picture, right? And it was nice. The candle was lighting it up. And I don't know where this came from. I mean, where does a crop circle come from? Who knows? So I take the picture, and there's a halo around my mother's head, and there's an orb on my father's heart. You know, orbs are these kind of points of light. It's like right here on my father, and then my mother has this halo around her head. And that was like I mean, I almost started crying. It was so touching, you know. And I sent it to my sister, and I said, well, these are who our parents are. You know, they were very simple people, but they were very connected somehow to upstairs, you know. And I never quite saw that because, of course, everyone has a personality and they have their negative traits, you know, and my mother's was kind of catastrophic thinking, which you're well familiar with. And my father got angry sometimes, but those were just their personality traits. We've all had personality traits, but that doesn't mean that's who we are. So I think this picture, when I took it with this light and the orb, showed me who they really were. And it was like a great blessing. And I kind of attribute it to this day where I was getting all this clarity from this little booklet. I was also, you know, sending my sister a lot of light. That was my lead up to Christmas. Christmas Day comes and we have our friend come, and we've made a meal and everything. And we made sure we called her up and said, well, what do you want for Christmas? meal, and we made sure we made the things that she wanted. So everything was cool. And then today, we find out that she calls us up. Oh, by the way, I have COVID. So we spent the whole day with someone with COVID. And now we're kind of back onto the Om Namah Shivaya, and I think we're going to do that. We're going to ramp that up for ourselves. And this Om Namah Shivaya, it's it's so ancient, who knows where it even came from, and Shiva, the word Shiva for this source energy, who knows, it's so ancient and goes way back, and it's as powerful as Christ, maybe even more original than Christ, So Om Namah Shivaya is kind of our mantra. And then we have the Course in Miracles. And really all those lessons are mantras. Some of them more than others. Like I was thinking about that, like, I am the Holy Son of God Himself, or the Son of God is my identity. Yeah, so those are pretty powerful I am statements. I am spirit. Those are words from another dimension. Those aren't just English. Those are ancient truths that have come down through that form, and the more reverence we have for them, the more effective they are in our inner transformation. The seriousness of our spiritual practice doesn't have to be heavy, but it does have to be responsible. Responsible in the sense that Tara Singh would call it reverence. Do you have the reverence? Do you have the ears to hear? He would always say that. Do you have the ears to hear? If a truth is spoken and you hear it, but then you don't apply it, then that would be like not having the ears to hear, right? Even though you heard the words, it didn't get in and it didn't make a difference, which means you don't have the ears to hear, or you don't have the reverence. So he stressed over and over again, reverence. Reverence for the teacher, reverence for the teaching, application of the teaching. He said, well, the Course in Miracles is worth nothing unless you apply it. Only Tara Singh could say this, but he'd go on to say, well, if you don't apply it, what's your life worth anyway? It's going to be a wasted incarnation, so he was pretty tough in that area. I think we got, all of us got that we had to give seriousness to our practice, our spiritual practice. And to me, the benefit is my life got a lot more simple. It got a lot more on purpose. It got a lot more beautiful, a lot less stressful. I work a lot, but it's all things that I love to do, so I don't feel like I'm being made to do something I don't want to do. I can remember Tara Singh one time saying, well, a wise person never takes on what they can't complete, and never takes on what they don't want to do. So if you're going to take something on, make sure you can get it done and complete it. And if you don't want to take it on because you don't want to do it, don't do it. And that's a wise person. So that really struck me. And then for years I worked as a contractor, and it's not like I didn't like it, but there were other things I liked doing better. And then when I was free of that whole life of having to carry bags of cement and cut wood and chop this and that, and I was like liberated. I was in another phase of my purpose of my mission in life, and it was good. It was good. And I attribute that to my spiritual practice. Like, your spiritual practice, you can only see what you can see at the moment, right? You are where you are right now with whatever you have to work with and with whatever karma you still have that is playing out. And that's where we all are. We're all right here where the karma is with us, which is the cause and effect of our thoughts, and in rebirthing we stress a lot of that, like you have this thought called a personal lie, and it could be running you. And then we see, wow, it really was running me. And then it takes attention to dissolve it and to have it not run you, right? That's kind of the process. Well, that's the undoing of karma. And what's the karma? Well, the karma is all those negative thought forms that are kind of attached to you that are producing those results, and including death. The benefit of a spiritual practice is it's going to liberate you from those thought forms. It's going to liberate you from that karma. And we'd like to think, well, it can happen overnight, and with some people maybe it does, but those are very few. For most of us, it's kind of a chipping away, kind of a, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you chip away at it, you chip away at it, you chip away at it, and then your life gets better, so you keep doing it, and that's kind of how we go. But there may be a point where we get even more focused. We're ready to receive something that will speed the process up, where maybe 5 years ago we weren't ready for that. We couldn't have moved that fast. So now this is why I'm sharing with you this little booklet we read about that Babaji transmitted to his high priest, basically, saying, Om Namah Shivaya, or focusing on the word of God, is the highest yoga. It's the highest yoga. And, I think if you looked, there are some really good writers on yoga. They'd probably say the same thing. There was Ramakrishna. He was a great sage, liberated soul that came in the late 1800s, and he had this disciple, Vivekananda, and he's honored all over India. They have statues of him. And he even came to America a number of times. He was probably the first real yogi who came far before Yogananda came and wrote Autobiography of Yoga. Far before that, this was Vivekananda, and he wrote wonderful books on yoga, different types of yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, so he wrote many books on yoga. And I'm sure, Raja Yoga is basically, all he says is it's breathing. Raja Yoga is doing pranayama, and I'm sure, I haven't read that book in a long time, but I'm sure focusing on the name of God is part of that. When you're doing the pranayama, you're focusing on the name of God, so it's all related. And our modern form of that is kind of breath work. So it's similar. And what does it do? Well, it dissolves your karma. It brings up those thought forms to be released, to be forgiven, to be healed, to be let go of. And it's the most, it's the fastest way to do it, if you're really serious about it. But it's interesting that you're the only one here today, because in this little booklet, he's kind of instructing this. It's Babaji and Sastraji, but it's like the characters of Gorakhnath and this other character, I forget his name, who would have been the Sastraji character. It's a counterpart. So the book is presented as like an ancient dialogue but it's Babaji and Sastriji having it in this time. Babaji also says to this other person that Gorakhnath is saying to this guy he's talking to, be very careful who you share this with, because it's so sacred, but people don't have the ears to hear. They'll just throw it on the ground like it's a piece of rubbish, you know? So you have to be very careful who you share these things with. And it's interesting, you're the only one that showed up. And in, you know, we have a lot of clients and a lot of students, and for years and years and years, and you're showing up, and you always show up. You're like a person who shows up, and you're serious. And so here you are. So it's like no accident. And that I would be sharing this and you're the only one that's going to hear it. So because perhaps at this level, I'm not saying at all levels, but perhaps at this level, you're the only one right now who has the ears to hear of all the people in our milieu, you know. I can remember Tarji saying, well, you know, Jesus had this incredible power and this incredible truth, and he fed the multitude. You know, thousands of people came to hear Jesus, and he worked miracles, and he raised the dead, and he healed the blind, and he fed 5,000 people with 7 loaves and some fishes. And then he said, and they never came back. And then he said, well, he could only find 12 people, you know, his disciples that stuck around and showed up. And even of the 12, they didn't quite get it, you know. So that's how rare a real student is. And Tarji would always say, forget about being the teacher. Be the student and let the teacher be the teacher, meaning the Christ, or meaning the Babaji, or meaning the Divine Mother. Let the teacher be the teacher. You be the student. You have the ears to hear. And then you're transformed. And then you're walking with the teacher, not underneath them, you know. It's a journey you go together. So I thought that was a very beautiful way of putting it, that you be the student. There's nothing more, how did he put it? There's nothing more blessed in life than to be the student, the real one, you know. And I thought that was quite touching, because, you know, I met this man, Sastriji, and actually Sastriji was Sandra's teacher when Babaji took Samadhi in 1984, and then Sandra kept going back all those years. Well, it was Sastriji who was mainly her teacher then, after Babaji. And she would see him every year and go to his house and spend time. And, you know, it was definitely a teacher-student relationship. But, you know, Sastriji was the Babaji, and then Sandra became the student of Sastriji. So that's kind of how it works. And that's how it's passed down. It's a lineage. And, you know, we don't always know the impact that those encounters have on us. Like I was with Tarji for 17 years, off and on. You know, I had my own place, and he was in California, I was in Philadelphia. So, but it was a holy relationship, and many encounters, and travels together. We went to India twice, we went to Europe, just he and I. And so those encounters are still unfolding in my life, and it's been, he died it's been 15 years since he passed away, right? And so those encounters are still becoming clear to me, the meaning of them, and how they were given to me but I wasn't ready to receive the lesson or fully the lesson. I got as much as I could at the time, but then they get deeper and deeper in time. So this is something that also happens when you encounter a truth or a true being. Your relationship with that truth unfolds in time. It's out of time, but our egos are so stubborn, it takes time to dissolve it, you know? And that's what the truth is there to do, is to dissolve our false. And, you know, look, we've been studying the Course in Miracles since I think Sandra since 1977, and I've been studying it since 85. So that's a long time to study something, but it's just as new today to me as it was back then. And the benefits of it are unfolding in my life like a stream that never goes dry, you know? So it's that kind of thing. And that's what a spiritual practice is. It's an ongoing stream where you're, like I began the talk by saying, we have to disengage somewhat from our worldly activity and give our focus to something higher. And then in that practice of giving our focus, we can go back into the worldly activity and still remain focused. At first not, because we're too conditioned, but as we become less conditioned, you know, our spiritual practice where we're making the contact, we can bring it back into everyday life and keep that focus. So, yeah. And you may have some tests along the way. You know, we've certainly had some tests with our neighbor, our noisy neighbor, and it's still ongoing. But I'm noticing we're reacting less and less and less and less. And if it's too noisy, we just move in the other room and set up shop over there and camp out, you know. And or last night I'm trying to get this Sanctuary of Silence book totally finished. Like, I know it's perfect. I've got all the little things. I found a few little more typos, and then I have to make an ebook of it to make sure they both come out at the same time. So I got all that work done last night because noisy neighbor I couldn't sleep anyway, so I just worked on the book. No big deal. So he's doing me a service, getting me focused on the book to complete it. Yeah, so something like that. Yeah, the arti is another wonderful spiritual practice where you just turn it on and listen to it, and it's kind of directly from Babaji, that particular arti. You know, there are artis that are sung all over India, but that particular one came from Harakan with sort of Babaji's blessings all over it. And those yogis that wrote it down were in his lineage. So we just put that on. We do our Course in Miracles. Then we do our, well, what do I want to be forgiven for? What am I grateful for? And what I want to get accomplished today, our petition. Then another lesson from the Course. Then we do breathing meditation with this thing. It's the Essene. Did I ever tell you about the Essene Gospel? Yeah, okay. So these are the daily meditations, morning and evening. They're like the Divine Mother in the morning, the roots of the tree, and the Divine Father in the evening. We're not so good about the evening one, but I think we will start getting into them. But we've been doing these Divine Mother ones in the morning, and they're very powerful. So, I mean, just for example, and it's about angels. It's about the angel of joy, the angel of life, the angel of the sun, the angel of water. So it's very elemental, you know. It's like Babaji's Elements, you know, where he did fire, water, earth, space. that kind of thing. So I'll send you this. I'll send you this Tree of Life. And it's from the Essenes. And we're kind of doing that in the morning. We're doing the mother meditation, and then we do some breathing, and then we do the arti and sing along, and that's our thing. So, do you have any questions?
This is, I guess, just a practical question. So, when you're doing the mantra or getting in touch with that word, is it important to speak it out loud?
Good question. Because in the beginning, when Babaji told us to do it for the COVID, he did tell us to say it out loud, because when you say it out loud, it creates a vibration in your voice box, right, and in your upper chest kind of thing, and that vibration, because that's where the COVID hits, in this kind of upper chest, throat chakra, heart chakra, in between those two, right? So by saying it out loud, you create a vibration of it in that area in your body. And then that gives those cells more protection. So we've been saying it out loud, but you don't always have to. I mean, if you're just, if you're riding on a train, you might want to just say it to yourself. But if you're home and you want to say it out loud, sometimes you might want to, just to see how it feels, and get that vibration, that actual physical vibe in the body. So that's what we're doing. But most people, when you see them in India and they're doing their mantras, they're not saying it out loud. It's quiet. It's kind of funny. In India, they have these little slings with a little bag, right? And you put the little sling on in the little bag, and then you stick your hand in the bag, and you do your beads in the bag. And they say, well, it's more humble to not show people that you're doing the beads. Yeah, but you got the bag. People know you're doing it. It's the same thing. What's the difference, You're over there with your little bag. I mean, give me a break. Make it simple. No, so we never went in for that bag thing. Mala bag. Oh, my goodness. This little Essene booklet, I can send you a PDF of that if you would like. I can't send you this other one because it's just a little book. I don't have a PDF file of it or anything. You could ask the ashram for it. Yeah, I told you the essence of it. I mean, it was such simple. You don't really need to read it. It's just that one thing, that the name of God is all you need to know. And if you immerse yourself in that, that's the highest yoga there possibly is. And then we think, when you combine that with the breathing, there's nothing more than that, and it's simple. And then you devote your work, whatever you're doing in your day, to the divine. And so you try to maintain the attention of the mantra while you're doing what you're doing, and do the dishes singing Om Namah Shivaya, or put the music on, put the arti on. Sometimes before, we would just put the arti on and go about our daily business and just have the arti on, just in the background. So we would just listen to it as we're doing other things, But sometimes we do sit down and actually, sing it, some of it.